Today, we are going to take a look at the Supreme's greatest hits, and we don't mean the R&B band.
We're talking the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court is being lobbied to block a Texas controversial social media law.
The court is about to flood New York City streets with guns.
And of course, Roe versus Wade.
I'm Laura Fitton. This is Future Forward.
I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch. So, Laura, we don't often do single topic podcasts, but there's just so many roads that lead back to this in immediate set of Supreme Court decisions that are all going to start landing in your social media feed in June, that I just thought it was important that we take a step back, look at the stories, and then look at the patterns, because it's complicated if you look at it as a series of pings, and it's actually quite simple if you look at it as a theme.
Absolutely. I mean, this is an unprecedented Supreme Court season, especially given what happened with Roe v. Wade and whether or not that court is still a valid part of our government versus being kind of hijacked.
I want to start with guns. I want to start with guns. And I want to start with guns because obviously the story of what's going on in Buffalo is tragic and upsetting and kind of expected.
Yeah, I mean, white male supremacist terrorist shootings are unfortunately no longer a surprise. And we still don't even call them what they are in the media, racially motivated, racially linked, 180-page manifesto saying, I am a white supremacist. You can come out and say the suspect is a white supremacist.
And, wears body armor, goes to a black neighborhood, goes to a black grocery store. And
3.5 hours to strike in the community in a badly segregated city on purpose, completely intentional. And the nuance of faking like he was going to kill himself and then not killing himself. That was also covered in his writings.
To what end? What was the strategic, Yeah. So, the media struggles with words like, lone wolf or, they're trying to determine, why this happened, one of those kinds of things.
They don't struggle with those words when the perpetrator isn't a white male.
No.
They do not struggle with those words. They refuse to use them for certain people.
So, I don't know if I clicked the right button in terms of whether or not you're going to get the sound on this or not. So this is, I've been doing a lot of work reading and rereading and putting in historical context the book 1984. And so the first thing I thought of when I thought of this young man wearing body armor going into a grocery store and mowing down people was this. Are you hearing this? Oh, yeah, I've got it. So I got to switch on a different sharing. This is 2 minutes. Do you know this clip, by the way, for those of you who are listening?
I don't, but I think we talked about the 2 minutes of hate on an earlier episode.
What's powerful about it, I'll just play it in the background for those of you who are watching it. What's powerful about it is, well, a couple of things. Leaders, quote unquote leaders, lead people in directions. Good leaders lead their community in positive directions. angry, vicious, hateful leaders take people in that direction. It's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. If you watch this clip from 1984, 2 Minutes of Hate, they're chanting the name Goldstein. And the audience of all white, angry, vicious, scary faces is being programmed by the leader, by Big Brother, effectively, to hate this name Goldstein. If any of the people in this audience had a weapon and someone named Goldstein appeared in their sights, they would kill that person. That's what's happening in this country. This young man, as terrible and as abhorrent as his behavior is he's certainly the actor and deserves whatever extraordinary punishment he receives. But he's also a victim. And I know that's going to get me in some trouble, and I'm going to get some hate mail for that. But he's when I say victim, I don't mean that.
He's a terrorist who was radicalized here by mainstream, Fox News, and by our former administration. We had an administration that realized the only way they could win election was by appealing to this extreme far right base, by giving them what they wanted, by saying both sides have fine people at Charlottesville. We knew right from the get-go. And that was why, like this thing about, oh, they're so loyal to me, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. They're loyal to him because nobody has validated them, because they are that extreme. And so there's this messed up interplay where they're harnessing power generally by pretending to believe the same things that these really, really dangerous radicals believe. And then they're emboldening them to go out onto the street with a literal, AR-15, whatever that was, at a protest and shoot people. They're emboldening them to do all these various, threats and manifestos and terrorist acts.
Yeah. There's a Tucker Carlson clip from a couple of days ago in which he goes off with absolute precision on exactly this and says, what this is voter suppression, because the government is bringing into the country voters that don't look like you and don't believe in what you believe in. And the purpose is essentially to give these new immigrants a vote in this country. And therefore you need to go kill them.
They always pull on themselves too. They're the ones committing the vast majority of voter suppression. In fact, probably all of it. And they sling that as their mud to sling. It's so disturbing. What happened to the FCC? Didn't we used to have regulations on media? Didn't we?
Well, never on internet. Never on internet. I mean,
Tucker Carlson's not on the internet. I mean,
he's on cable, which is also, well, he's on cable, which is not in any way regulated by. I mean, let's talk about that for a second, just because you brought it up. The FCC's entire mandate is that they control the public airwaves. And so the wire that comes into your house from a cable company is a private wire. And so, much like the FCC doesn't control what you say on your phone, you'd have to make pretty significant changes in the government's ability to monitor private communications in order for the FCC to have any weight in that area, which is, by the way, and it's not like the FCC did a spectacular job, monitoring the broadcast airwaves either. But what I think the reason why I raised Buffalo this morning, and I know that like when I sent you the note about what I wanted to talk about, you were kind of like, like you have these two parallel tracks, right? And so you've got this, and then we'll talk about the social media case in a minute, because it's also what's going to the Supreme Court. It's also very interesting. So you've got this kind of absolutist gun rights position rolling down the tracks. It's going to arrive at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, if it would be monumental if they did anything other than essentially say New York has no rights to control gun ownership. I mean, nobody believes we're going to get a Supreme Court ruling. So you've got Eric Adams. He's the new mayor. He's a cop. He's kind of a law and order cop, but he also doesn't want his streets flooded with guns. And he knows the problem, the almost inevitable problem that's going to cause. And what's interesting to me, I'm trying to find this story. Here we go. I mean, Adam's very concerned as city malls options because everyone seems to agree the Supreme Court is going to rule that New York, which by the way, is certainly not free of guns by any means, but doesn't have open carry, for example. Let me ask the question a different way. Like, have you ever been anywhere where someone was wearing a gun on their, not a police officer, but like just a citizen or a security guard was wearing a gun on their hip?
Yeah, it's pretty intimidating.
I just, it's hard not to be scared.
Yeah.
Because this thing that person across the room has could literally be pointed at you and your life would end.
Yeah.
And
I had ATF point a gun at me once because I was standing in the wrong place during a hotel bust of someone. And I was, like the ATF officer was there. The person they were aiming at was here and I was right behind. And I just remember like putting my hands up, backing away. I mean, it turned out to be ATF. He was plainclothes, so I couldn't tell at the time. And it's a terrifying feeling. And I've been in countries where security forces wear those giant machine guns. I know that's a very primitive term for it. It is intimidating. It is scary. And yeah.
So what happens to New York if we find ourselves in a place where almost immediately after the Supreme Court ruling, people start walking up and down Fifth Avenue wearing a gun? Like what is going to happen? And, again, New York has a dramatic rise in violent crime before the Supreme Court essentially gives the green light. And the reason why I maybe was a little bit simplistic in my raising of the Supreme Court and Buffalo in the same sentence, but like, we've got this parallel conversation about the rise in violent crime. And then every time this happens, at least in the past, the response has been, well, we need more good guys with guns.
Yeah, except the data, very clearly shows that those don't work.
Yeah. So does that mean, like, I live near a movie theater and there is a sign on the door with a symbol of a gun and a big swipe through it to let you know you can't bring your gun into the movie theater? You think you have to post that as and what would the consequences of that be if the Supreme Court says open carry is legal in all 52 states?
Yeah.
And by the way, part of what's interesting about this and this moment in time in American history is you've got the Supreme Court saying we're going to remove Roe versus Wade, and because it's a states' rights issue. Okay, I don't agree with that. I don't think we live in a country, not a series of standalone states that get to make their own laws. But if you accept that as their legal standing, then why wouldn't New York being able to make a decision about how it wants to manage guns not be within this? And again, you're not talking about logic here.
Yeah,
you're not talking about.
They're pro-life until it comes to like actually keeping people alive by avoiding COVID or, any other number of programs to protect people's lives. They are pro-states' rights until it's time to impose their particular flavor of extremism on all 50 states. I retweeted someone, I don't even know who it was. I can't give them proper credit, but in maybe the wee hours of the morning, I forget exactly when it was, but it was in the last 24 hours, who was like, pointing out their hypocrisy is just not working. We got to move past that and move into actually countering this effectively. They spent 50 years building up the groundwork to pack that court, turn people, extremists. The conservatives won the school board in my liberal Boston suburb, right? Like, it's sadly well choreographed and working, and we need to get our act together and fight back.
All right, so let's talk about the core of this show is about tech and media. So I want to now shift to this fascinating and I think less reported story about what's going on in Texas.
Yeah. They want to be able to publicly advocate for these really extremist things And that's how they got to where they've gotten on all the other stuff. And so they're trying to make laws to prevent tech companies from
curating,
cracking down on lies. Yeah. And at the same time, don't they also want to waive 230, right? So that not only are you trying to tie the tech companies' arms about what they can and can't remove, but you're also going to hold them liable for it? I mean, I'm in a cheery mood today, aren't I?
Yeah. Well, no. Look. All
Angry.
right. So let me just read a paragraph from the Washington Post, and then we'll talk about it. The Texas law took effect Wednesday after a U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans lifted a district court injunction that had barred it. The appeals court action shocked the industry, which had been largely successful in battling back Republican state legislators' leaders' efforts to regulate social media companies' content moderation policies. So essentially what they're saying in this law, which is now in effect in Texas, is that social media companies cannot moderate content. So the quote, the law strips private online businesses of their speech rights, forbids them from making constitutionally protected editorial decisions, and forces them to publish and promote objectionable content. The application was filed with Justice Samuel A. Alito, who was nominated by Republican President George Bush. What they're asking the Supreme Court to do is block the Texas ruling, the Texas law. Would it be surprising if the Supreme Court simply decided not to take the case?
I don't know enough about that aspect of Supreme Court work. When I know it's a tool they use, but that's all they would have to do to let the law keep going.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't know how much this goes on inside the chambers, but presumably they could say, listen, we're looking at Section 230. The Congress is looking at Section 230. That's a much bigger, complicated conversation. Why don't we simply wait and we'll answer it then? I mean, I think when you go to the Supreme Court to block a state court ruling, you're expecting expedience, which means some kind of emergency. And the problem with this story, and the reason why I brought it to our audience's attention, is if the Supreme Court doesn't act on this law, which we'll discuss in a minute, I don't even think it'll make the papers. Not picking up a request is not a news story. So, and I'm while I'm not much of a betting man, I would say in this case, I'll put even better than even money that the Supreme Court simply says we don't believe this needs our attention.
Right.
So you've got this triumvirate of cases. You've got the Supreme Court in guns and essentially not allowing cities to, not allow open carry. You've got Roe versus Wade taking away women's rights and opening the door to a whole series of almost inevitable claims about gay rights and trans rights and gay marriage and all of these things that seem like they're dominoes as part of that pattern. And then you've got
pregnant people's rights, because it's not just women. It's children, it's non-binary people, it's trans men, pregnant people.
Understood. I can only keep track of so many distinctions in my head at one time.
Right, but I mean, even before people became a little more aware on trans issues, we always used women, even when we meant children as well.
We could debate this another day. I would say that, I think part of what the Republicans do well is they simplify things down into digestible phrases and words, like right to life.
Pregnant people. It's easy.
I'm not sure that now is the time to be trying to sort people out on a new way to look at pregnancy, but you and I can
talking about
agree
my
to disagree on that.
child's
It's given the scope of the problems we have. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about
Given the scope of the problems
you're talking about my child's body and my child's rights. So that's why I'm standing up for you on it. Anyway, we can move on. It's
Yep.
pregnant people. It's a term. It includes the children who are raped.
But you're not against right to life as a phrase.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about women's rights, and I was saying it's pregnant people's rights.
Right. And I'm saying while we're debating acronyms, the world is coming apart. But again, I love that we do this podcast together, and it's fine that we don't agree on everything. Like that was not the terms of our engagement. So, but what I'd like to get back to is this pattern of issues coming to the Supreme Court that are ostensibly about freedom, but really are about, essentially
an extremist Christian worldview.
Yeah, in which the winning move for them is chaos.
Yes.
And
who else in the world wants the U.S. to be in chaos?
Yeah, I just can't think of anybody off the top. Oh, wait, there's somebody with a lot of weapons.
No, that guy. He's busy. Yeah. Chaos and hatred. When the school board here elected very conservative members, there was also a lot of complaining about, I can't believe how divisive this election was. And I kept just trying to calmly say to neighbors and friends, like, that's the entire strategy. Be divisive. That's how conservative, they don't have the votes anymore. So they have to do these really extreme things and create chaos. And the chaos is the point. The hatred is the point. And I just wish we could figure out how.
What did Steve Bannon say?
How to be a lot more healing so people are not susceptible to extremist views and radicalization. What
did Steve Bannon say? Flood the zone with shit?
Yeah. That's the strategy. And I don't, as strong as it is here and as terrible long tradition as we have of it here, I think fuel is being thrown on the flames from foreign interests who are very interested in a messed up, chaotic U.S.
All right, so let's talk about, we have about 6 minutes remaining. Let's talk about what we can do. So, I see that people were out on the streets protesting this impending. There. By the way, there is no doubt about what the Supreme Court ruling is going to be on Roe. Like, there's no, they're not. They might debate the language of the ruling. They might debate the periods and the commas and the phraseology, but the ruling is set. The votes have been taken. That's why the draft was written. The public protests about the impending ruling, I don't believe there's any possible way that they can change anything. Because
I don't think they change anything the court does. I think the hope was to persuade enough senators, but representation in government is so disproportional at this point. Even in Congress, which has passed the law to protect and codify Roe v. Wade. But this is not going to do it. And
Manchin voted against it, right?
Yeah. But, everyone was telling us when we were telling you not to vote third party in 2016, and even before that we were being hysterical, that Roe v. Wade was set law and we shouldn't worry our pretty little heads.
So
I would just like to see those third-party voters, those people who said Bernie or bust, those people who told us we were being hysterical. I would like to see them out fighting as hard. I would like to see the people who cannot become pregnant fighting as hard for this as those of us who can. And we're still not seeing that.
So I talked to a friend of mine, very active, very politically engaged, very smart, worked very hard during the last election, worked very hard during the midterms. And I asked him what he was doing this time coming up on the midterms. And he sighed and he said, I'm just tired. And, sustained rage is hard. So in the few minutes we have remaining, can you spin up your most optimistic self and give us some instructions about things we can do? I mean, in Ukraine, we learned a lot very fast. We did, I think slowed things down there by being active, and for example, having the Eurovision awards. By the way, you watched it, right?
Oh my God. I kind of had an opposite of a drinking game going, right? When you watch a show and you intake liquid on certain things, every time Ukraine was on the screen in some way, shape, or another, I just simply started crying. It was amazing. And sure enough, the voting public, not the jury didn't have Ukraine at the top. They had them like number 4, number 5. It's complicated how the voting in Eurovision goes. We won't get into that here. But the voting public gave Ukraine like 400 some points. So their final score was like 631, which was close to the record for Eurovision. And it was really important. And,
well,
the world needs to keep supporting. But what can we do here in the US? I want to see white men out as upset about abortion as women have always been. I want to see money, time, attention, articles, interviews supporting the women who fight for voting rights, who, by the way, as I've said before, are disproportionately Black women. Let's support the work they're doing. We can support abortionfunds.org, which is a network of different regional and local groups who are trying to protect individual humans. And we just need...
So say that again, Solar. Abortion?
Abortionrights.org. Abortionfunds.org.
Okay, I'm going to swipe my credit card when we get off this pod.
And the hashtag abortion funds, if you want to find a specific one local to you and help them directly. But please go round up your guys and get them to care. We are so tired of being alone in this. And of that being an unusual, disparity.
Thank you, listeners, for sticking with us. This is serious. It's important. And Laura, for I appreciate we hadn't rehearsed this end of the pod, and to throw at you, give us something positive to do, and you to deliver back with absolute clarity something we can do is highly appreciated.
We have always had to live like this, those of us who do not have full human rights.
All right. Well, we will see you again next week talking about something slightly less political. Have a good week, everybody.
Maybe. Don't jinx us.
Yeah, well, we'll try. Hold on.